Ism's good, pal.
I'm feeling good, pal. How about you?
Yeah, man. Can't complain. Not sick.
Yeah, same.
A bunch of folks.
Knock on wood.
Yeah, no. Oh, by the way, dude, do you know where that comes from?
I just read this recently, and I can't remember it.
So originally, when this sort of idea came about, it was believed that fairies lived inside of trees, and to kind of get their attention, and they wouldn't come out all the time. They would only come out, special occasions or whatever, but they would grant, wishes or blessings and that kind of thing. And so people would sort of like knock on the tree to sort of get their attention and hope that they would come out. Well, now, like fast forward thousands of years later, and you don't want something to happen, and you're like knocking on wood. But that's where that came from.
Oh, that's cool. I love that stuff.
Yeah, no, man, super cool.
I think we probably should revisit that. I mean, we did it like in season 1 or something, but
yeah,
that stuff's...
There was I swear there's like a list of these things that I recently
yeah, me too.
saw.
I saw.
I probably sent you.
I think I made the video and then sent it to you.
I think if anybody knows anything about this show, it's the stuff that I send you is what how we come up with our content.
I mean, that's so weird because every single story we get, you go, Tyler told me about this thing.
No, not true. For example, today we're going to be talking about...
Howdy, folks. Welcome back to your favorite podcast, That Would Be Rad, the podcast that majors in 80s and 90s nostalgia, comic culture, all things paranormal, and minors in retro video games, tabletop RPGs, pre-internet mysteries, and raising our kids to be half as cool as we were back in the 80s. I'm your host, Tyler Bentz, and this is your other host,
Woody Brown.
Man, I kind of got caught there with a breath
You
situation.
also sound like really just defeated.
Defeated?
Hey, welcome back. So...
Well,
it's okay, man.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up.
Half of us are excited to be here.
Hold on, I'm glad you brought that up. So last week, guys, I want to apologize, but I also want to say that it was not my fault. Woody,
what?
After the election results, Woody had
making it a
banger of a party and just was celebrating his ass off in his neighborhood.
Just making it up, dude.
And he had a long night, and he just did not want to record.
Not true, but I appreciate you making it up, dude. Good Lord. Oh, my gosh.
What have you been up to, Pat? Oh, actually, I do got to say this. I'm really proud of Woody.
Dude, you guys, you already know, he's already made up one story.
No.
Now he's coming in for the second one here.
I'm not going into anything fake. This is 100% true. I've got to give it to Woody because Woody and I both are the absolute worst with giving gifts because we're so excited that we just cannot wait until it's time. So Woody has been telling me for, maybe a month now.
Yeah.
Like, man, your present is so awesome. And,
quote unquote, it's already here, man.
Yeah, I cannot wait to give you your Christmas present. And I got to give it to him because this is a record. He was able to wait.
Until November.
First week of November.
The funny thing is, I wanted so bad to wait until December, and it just didn't make it.
You didn't make it. I know. You almost did, though.
Yeah.
But I got to say, just listen at what my present was.
So thoughtful.
After Dark, The Lost and the Lurking, The Hanging Stones, and The Old Gods Waken. I think this is pretty much all of Manly Wade Wellman's Silver John work.
Yeah, I think there's one more.
Oh, yeah. It's I think that's like a book of the short stories.
Maybe, yeah.
Maybe. This is the coolest present that I can think of. And I am so obsessed and I'm so thankful. And, early Merry Christmas, Woody.
And that's what friends are for. Yeah, dude. Well, I had found those books randomly at a thrift store. I think every single time I went to a thrift store, you're like, dude, you got to be on the lookout for these books. And I'm like, what? Who are they? And it was one of those thrift stores that they've kind of got stuff all over the place. But there's you never really find, in this one in particular, you never really find any good books. Dude, for some reason, I was like, I'll just check it out. Scanning through, nothing. Then You know, like when somebody looks through a bookshelf and then just decides to, instead of lining them up like as they should be, where you can read the spine, they pull out a whole section of books, put it on, its side and just block everything.
I hate it.
Well, as I had scanned through, I sort of scanned past that just for ease. And then I was like, well, I'll come back to that section. I kind of got distracted and I was looking around the store. And then I was like, I need to go back there. Dude, these books called to me because I lift up that thing and there they are.
Yeah.
Boop, 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 boop. And I'm like, what?
Amazing.
And dude, I think it was I don't even know if it was $5, dude.
Jeez.
Yeah. You go on eBay, you look at these things, some of them are like $50 a piece,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I have one that's I think it's like $200 or something. But the thing that sucks is so here's the funny thing. So the Old Gods Waken one that you gave me, where it's kind of it looks like the Wicker Man. It's pretty much on the front of it. So that's the one that I got from the library in probably middle school. And I remember not loving it at the time. I thought it was cool, but I think I was kind of turned off with the Appalachian thing because, that's where I grew up. And so it was I just didn't like it. Now, I think it's the most amazing thing. So I found the first edition that has the cover of a wizard. It looks nothing. They clearly just had this artwork and we're like, yeah, just
well, they talk about, in that book, they talk about druids and stuff. So that's
yeah,
cool.
But I mean, nothing about Silver John on the cover. I mean, it looks like Lord of the Rings or something.
Yeah. The I guess the ones that I gave you, it's all the same artist that's doing the cover.
Which are my favorite. They're the cooler ones. There is one that I think it's a reprint where it almost looks like my style artwork where it's a little bit cartoony. Have you seen that one?
No.
I think it was on the cover of the artwork that I did when we first talked about Manly Wade Wellman.
Yeah, maybe so.
But yeah, I'm super psyched. I mean, this character, Silver John or John the Balladeer, is, I feel like we mentioned him on every episode of our October Spooktacular, and I'm just super psyched. So,
well, I knew you would appreciate it a lot more. Now, that's not to say that I didn't like him. I read the first couple.
Hated them.
Of those? No. Well, when I bought them, I kind of thumbed through a few pages and I was like, good Lord, dude, I don't think I can get through this language.
You do have a
And then we
time.
talked about him on the show and we were just talking about him in general. And then you mentioned, how he influenced Mignola and Hellboy. And I'll get to that in a second.
Yes.
But so I had this regained interest and I was like, okay, I'll pick him back up. And I started reading. I'm like, oh, dude, not only do I have the perfect Christmas present for Tyler here.
Oh, yeah.
But man, this stuff is amazing. And now, folks, I promise you, we're going to get into the meat of what we wanted to talk about today. Let me talk about why we're going to talk about just the general topic. Tyler and I were just kind of discussing places we're going this year and this summer and stuff. And one of the places that my family is probably going is the upstate New York area. And, every time we say, hey, we're going here or whatever, both of us are like, oh man, you got to check this out or look up this or, you know what I mean? Or, hey, I found this about kind of the area. And my thought is to at least visit some of these places potentially, unless they're haunted or something, I'm not taking my family there.
I mean, this place is pretty.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we started talking about that. And then Tyler was like, well, have you ever heard of this? Have you ever heard of that? Hey, there's also this thing. And it turns out this area of the Catskills is a place where all kinds of crazy stuff happens. And we're going to dive into that in a little bit. But first we wanted to kind of just catch up and talk about some of the connective tissue, to be honest, that kind of connects, the shows over the last few weeks throughout Halloween, but also before that into, this stuff. And first and foremost, I got to talk about how much I love Hellboy.
Yes. Well, can I tell my Christmas present, which...
Oh, yeah. Which triggered me to just be like, fine, I'm going to give you yours not to.
I mean, it was not intentional, but as soon as I did it, I was like, man, I wonder if this will make him pull the trigger and give me my gift. Almost selfishly, I have been obsessed with Hellboy forever. I've been trying to get Woody to read it. And I'm always like, man, it's like little short stories talking about this or this. If you know anything about Hellboy or Mike Mignola, he is such a lover of all things like folklore, anthropology, that kind of thing, and then sort of weaving those themes into these missions or whatever, like little short stories with his character Hellboy.
Yeah.
And I've been talking about it forever, and basically I just got to the point of being like, Woody, have you read this Hellboy story? Have you read this Hellboy story?
I'm like, I'm always like, no. and like, again, it's kind of like the Manly Wade Wellman stuff.
Yeah.
I don't think the time was right. Like, I can appreciate it now, and now I'm diving in head first, but keep going.
Yeah. Well, so I convinced Woody to get. So I was reading one of like the trades, and if you know anything about Hellboy, there's like a million of them, and it is a little confusing. And I didn't know this until recently when trying to figure out like how to tell Woody what to get, because like the volumes are totally different than like what's in like the omnibuses or the omnibuy, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I'd be like, oh man, you got to read this. You got to read this. And so I finally convinced him into getting the first omnibus, and he was like, well, there's a big deal on Amazon, so I might as well just get all 4. So he does this, and I'm like, yes, now we can like talk about it, now we can get into it, now we can sort of discuss some of these themes like on the show. And then I'm like, oh, cool, have you read the Baba Yaga story yet? And he's like, oh man, it's not in any of these 4 omnibuses. So there's like 2 more omnibuses that are like his short stories, which are probably like my favorite, I would say. Mm-hmm. And so I just bought him the first one. He gets it. That's like, hey, it's your early Christmas present. I think this was even in October.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah.
It was like before Halloween.
Maybe, yeah.
I do that. He gets it. I'm like, awesome, man. Have you read that Baba Yaga story yet? Oh, no, it's in volume 2.
Yeah.
So,
well, no, the best is like I'm like reading through volume 1 of these short stories, and they're really, really good. Some of them are like a page long, maybe 2 pages long.
Yeah, they're great.
And they're just really awesome. I will
Pancakes?
say, Pancakes is amazing. I will say for anybody interested in getting into Hellboy, if you haven't read these comics at all, or don't know much about the character, I would say kind of you have to sort of get volume 1 of just the regular omnibus and volume 1 of the short stories to kind of like intermix them, because if it was just the short stories, you might not sort of grasp, it'll be funny kind of, and there's cool stuff, but you just don't know much about the character, Real quick, though. So I read through the first volume of the omnibus just super fast. It was amazing. And then I'm reading through the short stories, and I'm getting through there, and I'm like, man, I know he said it was in here, and I just do a quick, easy, maybe it takes 5 seconds Google search.
Yeah.
Which volume is the Baba Yaga story in? First thing that comes up, volume 2. And I'm like, oh, man.
So disappointing.
But still, super grateful for the gift. Kickstarted my journey into Hellboy. And here's a couple of the reasons why I just love Hellboy. Tyler mentioned earlier that Mignola is super into folklore. That's like an understatement.
Oh, yeah.
He's not just like into it. He's like a student of it, really.
Big time.
And I mean, I'm talking like super obscure stuff.
Way. Like
of all cultures, too.
Stuff that there's no way that he could only get off of the internet. Like
Right. And plus, he wrote these, not necessarily far before the internet, but like 90s, right?
90s, yeah.
So well before the ease of use, we'll say, of being able to research on the internet.
Yeah.
And even if you're not like a comic book fan necessarily, if you're a fan of our show, you're going to love this universe, because it's these episodic adventures of this character who sort of doesn't really know his place in the world, of course, because he's a demon after all. He's working with this government organization, a secret organization that essentially goes out and, well, I mean, for the lack of a better way to put it, just sort of saves the world.
Yeah.
One sort of, I don't know, demon or entity at a time. And, there's another thing that I just love in anything, whether it's movies, any kind of art form really, is good guys beating up on Nazis. And so much of this sort of origin story of his character has to do with like Nazis essentially trying to open a portal and bring in this like, world destroyer kind of.
Which is very similar to like Aleister Crowley.
And very similar to, and goes with my theory of like, I think I'm controlling the universe right now. Because it's also very similar to our D&D campaign that I plucked out of thin air.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
Except, minus the Nazis.
Yeah. Well, the thing that's cool, and you'll learn this within like minutes of looking into like Hellboy, but like kind of like what Woody was saying, Hellboy is basically this character who is brought into our realm. He's a demon. He has horns. His name is like Anung Unrama. He's basically supposed to be a tool to just completely destroy the earth, which, like I said, Aleister Crowley, sort of like the Ion of Horus or like the Age of Horus, like bringing on this like new age. And that's a big sort of occult kind of thing. Well, he gets here and then he's adopted by these U.S. military guys back in like World War II, like in the 40s. I think it's 1947, actually. And he's adopted by this guy named... This is weird because it's spelled Trevor Brutenheim or Brutenholm, I think. But I think it's actually pronounced Broom, which is weird. It's like a Massachusetts style spelling, pronunciation. But
Gloucester.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's spelled
Gloucester.
Farfenuggen.
Yeah. But he's like adopted, and then he's just like as human gets. It's almost like Superman in a weird way.
Except that like he's immediately accepted, which is really cool.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
yeah,
like he's
right.
not afraid of showing himself. All he wears is like a trench coat.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep. And so what's cool about him is, and I've always kind of told Woody this, it's that character that we both love, which is so similar to Manly Maid Wellman's Silver John. Is he's a loner. He's sort of like a traveler. He just kind of bounces around. And what's cool about him is he's a very flat character, sort of like Silver John. I would say Silver John's not as flat as Hellboy.
It's this like idea that I've come to like, I think I can trace it back to one thing, dude. There's this type of character, this archetype almost, that I just gravitate toward, other than sort of like the Punisher sort of like revenge character, which I love. It's this character that is just an accidental hero.
Yeah.
And sort of these episodic adventures that they go on, just trying to like make their way in the world and just trying, it's a little bit different for Hellboy because he's on like quote unquote missions, but there are episodes or, longer stories where he is just out on his own. Like he goes to Africa. That's the part that I'm at right now.
Oh, that's awesome.
And he's sort of faced with these challenges. Same goes for like Berserk, for those of you that have read that manga. Same kind of deal. You've got this character who is extremely interesting. They're just trying to go from A to B, and all this other stuff happens in the meantime, and their character evolves. They become a hero. But I know why, dude. I just thought about this. It's because of things like the old school 70s / early 80s TV show, The Hulk. And Kung Fu.
That's a good one, yeah.
Where you've got this same kind of character. And now the more modern version of it would be like Mandalorian, which all kind of comes from like Lone Wolf and Cub and that kind of stuff, where you've got this person who had some trouble, or they come from a troubled background. In this case, Hellboy's actual demon. And they end up being this unlikely hero put through these circumstances. And really, that's how they become the sort of good character despite the challenges or their background that they have to, sort of how society would typically label them,
Right.
Hulk is a monster. Mandalorian's like a freaking bounty hunter. Lone Wolf and Cubby's like an exiled samurai that,
a Ronin.
Yeah, a Ronin, who I think like killed his master, but because it was his master's request. Anyway.
Which, by the way, do you know what a Ronin means?
Yeah. It's like
it's just a masterless samurai.
Okay, there you go.
Yep.
And what was I saying, man? Interrupted me to make a Japanese translation perfect.
It's pronounced
Anyway,
Ronin.
yes, it's just an incredible story. And I think initially when Tyler was trying to get me into Hellboy, well, a couple of things. The reason why I never got into it in the 90s, are you kidding? Like, you think I could bring a book home in my house?
Oh, yeah.
And my mom be like, what's this? And it just says Hellboy on top of it.
Yeah.
She's throwing it in the trash immediately.
Yeah, right.
And I just didn't, I didn't care about that kind of stuff, unfortunately, like I do now. I was more, like Brit pop.
Which I didn't get. I mean, as a, long time, I mean, pretty much my whole life, comic nerd, I was never into Hellboy, like back in the earth, like when it was, in being published in, like,
or whatever.
Yeah, like single issues were coming out. I actually did not like his art style at all. Like the big swaths of, like, his like filled black areas, and it was just sort of, I don't know. I just didn't like it. It was very, almost in a way of how I first originally sort of perceived like Jack Kirby's work. Like it's not, like there's sort of like an ugliness to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, for sure, man. It is kind of like, it's a little harsh.
It is harsh.
Blocky and seemingly like simplistic, but that, that again is coming from my initial thoughts on it. Obviously it's not, but yeah, it took me, well, back in the day, I just didn't have any, I was like, I don't know, man. Here's the other part. So it has things that we talk about in the show, and I just mean like just a random thing that I think initially back in the 90s, someone who has no idea about this stuff would just kind of, it would be a detail that would just be kind of brushed over, overlooked, shrugged off. There's this part where they go into this house, and this guy's talking about how these in the middle of the night, they woke up and all these things were gone, and blah, blah, blah. They were awake, but they weren't able to move. They see this candle. He's like, yeah, and then this candle was left here. And he grabs it, and it's a hand of glory. Now, they explain that a little bit, but then that's it.
Yeah.
Dude, you couldn't look that up on the internet. No. I wouldn't have known what the heck that was. I'd just been like, okay, cool, hand of glory.
Which we had a whole episode on it.
Red jacket, green jacket, who gives a shit, So there's elements of that I think, again, if you're a listener of our show, you will understand all of these elements of the things that we talk about from different parts of the world, too. He doesn't just stick to, and that's another cool thing. It kind of bounces around in terms of like what year and all these missions and the different locations that they have to go to based on, whatever's going on. And he ends up confronting all these different types of entities, from ancient gods and ancient creatures to, like Tyler said, Baba Yaga, all this stuff, man, that we've kind of talked about on the show and we'll continue to talk about. And honestly, we'll get ideas for future episodes because of,
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's where you and I differ a little bit. When you said...
That's where you and I different.
When you said you think that somebody should read like the sort of the overarching story, which I guess would be like Right Hand of Doom.
Yeah.
Maybe Chained Coffin.
Yeah. I mean,
Chained Coffin starts to get into it.
Yeah.
But for me, like the most alluring thing about Hellboy is he comes into our plane of existence, if you will. He's adopted by this guy who plays sort of the role of like the father figure, this Trevor Brutenholm Broom character. And then the U.S. military creates a sort of special department called BPRD, which is where he works, which is the Bureau of Paranormal Research and Defense. And so that, just creating that was such a genius move, because now you have like, so now he's an agent of BPRD. And so that creates all these anthology-based like little short stories. So it's like, it'll be like Prague, 1972, Africa, 1965, Mexico, 1950s. Like, it's really, really cool because like he's able to just bounce them around. So I would just imagine that like he's probably, we're probably like him in that way where, we get obsessed with things. We get obsessed with like, oh man, this Slavic folklore story of this character, or this obscure, Malaysian cryptid. Like, for us, we have episodes. And so
Right.
that sort of fills that hole that we're like, just freaking out about this character. Whereas with him, it's like, you can tell that he's like, oh, wow, I really like the theme, this super rare and obscure Irish story from the 1500s. Oh, I'm just going to throw Hellboy into that. And I mean, it's amazing. He's just like this wayfaring stranger, that just pops up throughout history. And it's so good.
Yeah. It's so good. It's so awesome, man.
Yeah.
One of the coolest stories, and it was perfect for spooky season, was his what would you call it? Like episode? I mean, like what?
I mean, I guess like
anyway,
short story,
one of his
maybe?
stories is called The Crooked Man, and he talks about this just absolutely terrifying looking crooked. Well, he's not really. His face is kind of droopy, and it's very weird.
Which the art is done by Richard Corbin.
I mean, he's one of my favorites now.
And he's another super ugly style artist.
Yeah, it's hard to explain, and I don't want to dive too deep into it. The story itself is so scary, or just like spooky and weird and creepy, and like there's elements of it where I was just like, man, this is incredible. And then I found out that the newest Hellboy movie was based on this story, and I'm like, what? They made a movie? Because it was so, like, there's this scene, which they have it in the trailer, so this is not spoiling it, but I had read it the day before I had watched this trailer thinking, before I even knew that this was a movie, and I'm like, oh man, that's so intense. This sort of like, I don't know how to explain it other than just like a bag of human skin, essentially. It's like a person, imagine if you're just like, all of your organs and bones and stuff were just like taken out of skin, and all that was left was skin. And then I'm going to want to talk about what's been going on in my neighborhood in just a second. But this animal like crawls in through the window and crawls into the mouth of this person that's just like only like flattened skin, and then becomes like the person again. And that's how like she enters back into, that's like their version of like the Skinwalker kind of.
Which by the way, before you continue, I'm super embarrassed because I've thought all these years that I had read The Crooked Man before, and which is why I've made comments like, I guarantee Mignola was a big fan of Manly Wade Wellman. Never knew until recently, where I read the foreword for The Crooked Man. And he's like, this is my love letter to Manly Wade Wellman.
Yeah, and it's like there's this character in it that is, kind of like Silver John, except that he only, well, I should say only in the way that he was like a guy from this town who just kind of wandered off. He had this interaction with a witch.
Well, Hellboy would basically be Silver John.
Yeah. But this guy kind of reminded me of him, honestly. He wandered off after this interaction with a witch when he was young, and he basically is kind of cursed, and he comes back, and then him and Hellboy have to fight this thing. It's really, really cool. There's a bunch of cool characters. I want to watch this new movie.
Yeah, me too.
Just because of this. I had no idea that it was.
I was just so turned off because I don't know. Visually, I was, there's no yellow eyes. The chest piece looks weird, but a couple of our listeners have hit me up and they're like, okay, you got it. Like, if you can look past that, it is the best Hellboy movie ever made.
Which, I watched the first one the other day.
It's awesome.
It's pretty cool.
It's different though.
Yeah. It's different, and it's just fun to be in that universe, but I don't think they have to go very far to make it the best Hellboy movie,
I mean, I love those movies, but if you're like a
girl,
huge
dude, I don't like that girl.
Yeah, I know. Well, to me, that's the thing, and that was the big thing with Mignola sort of butting heads a little with Guillermo del Toro, who produced the movies. Del Toro was like, oh, we need to sort of make it like a love story. And so there's this weird, like, it's almost like Hellboy's in like an Arrested Development type situation, to where he's sort of like the old curmudgeon, but then at the same time, he's almost like a teenager, like pining away for this girl. And it's just, I don't know, to me, that's like the biggest critique of the
kind
movies.
of. I knew that you had said that. There is sort of like a strange connection he has with this. I think she's like a college professor in the books.
Oh, well, it's not Liz though, right?
No, it's not.
It's the blonde girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if like they tried to bring that element into it.
Mm-hmm. You're talking about like how he like rescues her in like the Conqueror Worm and stuff.
In that one, yeah. But she comes up a lot in the main storylines, and he just has this like protective vibe. But it's a little more than just that. There is some sort of tension there. I haven't gotten,
Yeah, but it's not like
like he's not this like jealous.
Yeah. It's just
I'm super excited to get into this character and all these stories and stuff, and just I mean, frankly, kind of learn new folklore that exists around the world because of it.
Yeah, absolutely,
dude. Before I know everybody's like waiting for us to get into the weird stuff that exists in the Catskills, but here's the thing: we don't even have to go that far. And folks, I need your help because there's some weird stuff going on in my neighborhood.
Very weird.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
It's a pretty cool place if you're a Martian.
Or a vampire.
You think you really know what's happening around here, don't you?
Is anyone out there? We're fighters for truth, justice, and the American way.
Hey, this is Woody.
And this is Tyler. And you're listening to That Would Be Rad.
And now, back to our show. All right, man. So, let me explain to the listeners here what's been going on. I'd say maybe, like last week, was it?
Yeah, I think so.
I am in my neighborhood. I run the first lap through my neighborhood, come back to my house.
12 miles.
No. It was only like 2, which is pretty good because I haven't really been running actually because of my knee and all that. But anyhow, I feel pretty good. And they're like, well, I'm just going to walk the rest until, I need to help get the kids off to school.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the light, because it's getting lighter earlier now. Because, usually I do this around like between 6 and 7. Mm-hmm. And I'm back. Well, I go out up this hill and I'm like, man, something just smells awful. And it's that smell initially that I was like, it kind of smells like that sort of musky smell that you smell if there's like a rattlesnake nearby or something like that.
And you forgot deodorant again.
No. I thought there might be a snake nearby. And it was kind of like
it had like that weird
that weird
reptile.
Sort of just like weird, not quite rotten at first.
It's a weird smell.
But it's just it's unique.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, what is that smell? And it was that week in particular, it was kind of like a little bit warmer. We had a little bit of like a warm front actually before it got cooler again. Mm-hmm. And I'm walking up this hill and it gets a little bit stronger. I'm like, golly. Then it kind of dissipates and gets weaker once I reach the top. Well, I turn around and I come back and I'm on the opposite side of the road at this point. And walking down and there's that smell again. And I just happened to look down and dude, I sent this to Tyler, I think almost immediately. He's probably still asleep or something. And it was this deer head.
Yeah.
It only had, and it was a young, I guess, buck. It only had like one sort of antler. The other one, I didn't get close enough to see if it was like broken off or whatever. But the deer head was cut like clean.
Like laser precision.
Yeah. Laser precision, dude. Perfectly cut. And in a way that wasn't sort of like, oh, we're going to make this a trophy and it fell off of a truck or something. It was very strange. Just the deer head. I'm like, what? And to top it all off, it's on the side of the road, not too far away from like the wood line, but far enough away to where I just couldn't wrap my head around why this deer head was here. It was also pretty fresh. What I mean by that is there wasn't anything sort of like, it's almost as if flies had just sort of noticed it. There wasn't anything crawling around it. There wasn't anything.
No, like predation.
No. And further back in the neighborhood, closer to the lake, there are a ton of like buzzards and stuff usually that sort of sit up high on these power lines in the backside of the neighborhood that go, and the power lines kind of go across this like cove to the other side. Anyway, I was kind of surprised, like, why aren't there buzzards, So I took a picture, went home. That was puzzling. The next day, I'm walking around. The head's gone. I don't notice anything else. And I'm looking. Okay? Nothing. I'm like, man, that was just so weird. But ultimately, I text like through the neighborhood, and we all kind of just like chalked it up to, there was this dang kid that came around talking about bow hunting and stuff in our neighborhood. Maybe, I don't know, he got spooked and dropped it, whatever.
Which, let me interject though real quick. What Woody's not saying is there was also very little blood around the head.
There wasn't a pool of blood. It was almost like that area was like, I don't want to use the word coagulated because, or cauterized or anything like that. It really, but it was weird, dude. It was like black.
Super weird.
Yeah. And you know what I mean? There wasn't a pool of blood. You're right. There was also not any drag marks or teeth marks like of an animal that maybe had the head in its mouth and dropped it because it got spooked. None of that. It's just laying there.
And also, like, for people saying, like, oh, well, animals don't eat, like, the head.
This is the first time we're telling them. They're not saying that to you.
I mean, I'm just saying people probably are thinking that, and I'm going to cut them off at the pass.
Already pissed at the skeptics and they haven't even started saying it. Go ahead.
I hate them. No, there's actually, like, really soft, like, sort of fleshy meat, if you will. I know that's kind of gross to some people, but, like, around the eyes. So that is, like, one of the things that animals will immediately start. Yeah,
there was almost zero scavenging.
Yeah,
that had been done to this head.
And also, as a kid that grew up around hunting, my whole family hunted and stuff. One of the things is because Woody was like, maybe like a hunter like took it, but if we're gonna go that far, if you're gonna have a hunter that's gonna do that, he's not gonna leave the horns. On the head. He's at least going to saw those off to keep them as
grew up with hunting and deer, still calls them horns instead of antlers. It's neither here nor there.
I mean, they were tiny.
The only theory we had as neighbors was that it maybe fell off. Maybe whoever killed this thing, or whatever, this sort of dropped out of their, I don't know, bag. I'm not sure what they
rickshaw.
Anyway, the next day, nothing, head's gone. Just kind of chalk it up to like weird. Now, in the meantime, keep in mind, guys, I don't really listen to podcasts much that have anything to do with like what we talk about on the show. To be honest, I end up always listening to like true crime stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And I just happened to be that day listening to this one about serial killer. And then I see this head and I'm like, oh my God. Oh yeah, it's probably just fell off this kid's truck. We got a serial killer in our neighborhood.
Yeah.
Then it's gone. I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. 2 days go by, nothing. And I'm looking. 3 days later, I'm walking up the same road. And the same road that I've been walking all week. I know I would have noticed anything weird, especially this.
Yeah, because you're like looking now.
I'm actively looking for weird stuff. On the left-hand side of the road, dude, is this strange clump of fur. And it's a small amount, almost like, I don't know, man, the size of like a couple squirrels worth of fur, okay? But it's clearly deer fur. And it's just laying there on the left-hand side of the road. And I take a picture of that, and I'm like, what the crap, dude? Then I kind of just turn my head and look sort of at an angle. I'd say about like, let's say you're facing 12 o'clock. At about 2 o'clock up the road, on the opposite side, I see like a weird sort of like, it's not leaves, it's just like colored. It seems like, okay, is this fur? So I walk across the street, go, and it's further back into the woods a little bit. So I'm like, oh man, okay, I'm just gonna go back there. I walk back there, and there's like a fence line there. It's like barbed wire or whatever, but there's no fur on the barbed wire. Like if you guys again have been around deer, when they hop over, sometimes they get nicked or whatever, and there'll be like a little fur tuft or something. Nothing, completely clean on the ground, dude. Just like I was just talking about with Hellboy in The Crooked Man, there's like this almost to me, it looked like an empty, sort of deflated half body of deer, just like laying on the ground. And then next to it, like in a weird, unnatural position, a leg with a hoof on it.
Huh.
Nothing chewed.
What?
The flesh is like, I didn't start poking around. I didn't want to see if like, is it cut? Was it, chewed off? I wasn't looking close enough, but from what I could see, I didn't see any bite marks. I didn't see any areas where predators had like started chewing on that sucker.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'm like, so I take a picture of that, send them both to Tyler.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just thinking, God, what the heck, dude?
I mean, okay, even if this is the most mundane sort of like scenario,
Mm-hmm.
it's still, you still have to account for there being clearly a dead animal that somehow parts of it are moving around.
Right.
Like,
and weren't there before.
Right.
So like if my first scenario is, somebody just accidentally dropped it.
Yeah.
Cool. I would think that would have happened the same time. And in other words, those body parts I would have found on the same day.
Yeah.
Nope. Different days. It's absolutely impossible that I would have missed those things of fur, because the first one especially was like literally right on the side of the road.
Yeah.
I couldn't miss it. The other one, maybe, but even still coming back the direction that I would have been coming back, it is also super noticeable, especially after having seen this head. And to top it all off, the head wasn't in relatively close proximity to both of these items.
Yeah. I have no idea.
It's strange, man.
It's very strange.
Now, I also found this like weird rattle
What?
in the
You
woods
tell me
close
this.
by. I brought it into my house.
Oh, boy.
Is that wrong? I'm kidding, dude. I'm kidding. Oh, I wanted to keep that going for a second to see if you would get really scared.
I was like about to just be like, dude, are you, like, what is wrong with you?
There are these
4
wet
seasons
footprints
in.
on the floor.
Oh, man, that is...
So you guys tell me if you got any theories, if you think that maybe we're just a little overhyped on this and coming out of the spooky season and also out of sort of some of the stuff that we're talking about today, if you think, oh, guys, it's probably just a hunter, like maybe he field dressed the deer out in the woods and then these pieces sort of just got scattered. Even if I say that out loud, it sounds stupid. But...
Yeah.
I don't know. Do I have a serial killer in my neighborhood? I do have some new neighbors, guys.
I think 100% serial killers. Yeah. Or skinwalker.
Well, and here's why I said I think it might be a skinwalker.
Mm-hmm.
There are, different groups of like deer in my neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Different like
rival gangs of deer.
Yeah, something like that. Well, not too long ago, this, maybe the other day, I was walking and, my headlamp will reach out into the woods and I'll see these like eyes kind of pop up and I always kind of walk toward it just to make sure it's a deer, And dude, the other day it was so strange. Like one was kind of following me, dude. I was coming back around from the neighborhood. Now, deer typically don't do this, okay? Like they usually just kind of like hop out. So... well, I'm not trying to feed this thing or something. I don't know what you're saying. But, like, I look up into the woods, and it's just kind of, like, looking at me. And I always say, like, hey, buddy, how's it going? If deer are close. When I do that, they typically just, like, bump, 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 bump. They bound up the hill, and they disappear. This thing was just kind of, like, watching me. Then I, like, look back over. Boom. It's, like, right there. I'm like, what the heck, dude? And I go around the corner to another section of the neighborhood. It's right there.
And did you say this is before or after?
This is after.
Oh.
He thinks I don't know, man.
He's like, this guy's on to me.
He did something with my brother's head.
Or that, yeah. Yeah, I mean, oddly enough, as big of a true believer as I am, in sort of real life or real world sort of applications, I usually try to figure out ways that, oh, well, it could be this or it could be this, but I mean, it is bizarre. I mean, I think the most obvious sort of skeptical approach would be to say, oh, well, maybe a hunter killed it. Maybe the hunter, like you said, field dressed it, left the head, cut it with a laser.
Yeah, just the pocket laser.
Just a pocket laser, yeah. A lightsaber in his pocket. It's weird that there's no massive amounts of like blood trails,
trails.
But you're seeing all these different parts of it. Like,
could it be like scavenger animal? Like, we do have coyotes sometimes. Yeah. We do have foxes. I saw a fox, I don't know, a month ago or so in the woods. Mm-hmm. Did a fox, try to just bite that antler and drag that head? Again, no drag marks, dude. I don't know. And that's what I'm hoping for. I hope there's not some sort of like alien within these woods in my neighborhood or serial killer that just moved in.
I mean, that's the scariest part, because if you I mean, this is going to get a little graphic, but if you cut the head off of a deer, there's going to be blood everywhere. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're talking massive amounts, even if it soaks into the ground, just from like the.
Should I go out into the woods and just try to see if I can find any other clues?
Yes. That's what we're all wanting to hear.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll do it.
Okay. Yeah, report back to us.
Now, I joked about finding like a little artifact, like an Indian rattle or, something of the like. Mm-hmm. And that kind of does lead us into what we're talking about today. What really sort of, aside from, hey man, I'm going to upstate New York, dude, the deer head, and also this. Have you ever heard of, now Tyler? Mm-hmm. You're gonna have to dive into it, man.
All right, so it kind of did have me looking into upstate New York, and I have some friends that go on vacation in the Catskills, and I've always thought that area was really cool. It's pretty remote. It's very it seems like a mountain range that belongs down here, which is why I think I like it. Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess it is technically still the same range, but you know what I mean? Like it.
Yeah,
it
the
feels
vibes are similar.
Yeah. It feels like North Georgia or something like that. And I've heard for years stories of, coming out of the Catskills and like the Hudson Valley and all that kind of stuff, where you hear stories of like gnomes. You hear stories of, that's where Rip Van Winkle sort of originates from. And I'll get into that here in a little while. But there's a lot of like lore that surrounds that area, especially like Native American stuff. And like I said, with the gnomes or little people, possibly some sort of fairy kind of stuff. In looking into that, I ran across this topic that I was really surprised about, because we've already done a full episode on cursed objects. We talk about, the cursed dolls and all that kind of stuff. So I was really surprised that I had never heard anything about this. And then lo and behold, I find out that there's a documentary by some of my favorite filmmakers, the Newkirks, who were responsible for Hellier. And they made a documentary called The Unbinding. And it's about this cursed object called the Catskills Crone. And it all kind of comes from these two hikers that were, obviously out in the Catskills hiking, and they run across this object. And you want to describe it, Woody?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a wooden, I hate to use the word doll, so I'm going to say like a wooden, like sort of figurine or mm-hmm. Carving, of like a woman,
very primitive though,
very primitive, ancient looking statue,
looks pagan,
small statue, looks of pagan origin, and it's got like, to me initially kind of looked like a priest or something, and anyway, it's got like a noose, mm-hmm. a rope noose around its neck hanging down, and then it's got these nails nailed into the eyes. Now, immediately, when Tyler sends me a picture of this thing and says, these hikers found this thing, my first thought immediately was, hopefully they just took a picture of it and talked about it with friends later. Lo and behold, they did something but it's probably number 2 on the list of our advice. Number 1 being just close your blinds.
Yeah.
Number 2 is if you find something in the woods that looks a little crazy, don't take it home with you.
Yeah, for sure.
Because every time, dude, stuff gets crazy, and that's what happened here.
The Churunga stones, the Hexam heads, I mean...
Everything.
They all have, like, super similar sort of, I guess, what, like poltergeist type activity?
Yeah, there's poltergeist activity. Sometimes there's, like, spirits walking through the house. Sometimes there's these visitations, these experiences, like, just... bad things follow this stuff around.
Yeah. Which, we've talked about that too. And I do have a few theories regarding it, but we'll get into that later.
Yeah, so this entire story sort of came from this Reddit post on a paranormal, like, Reddit thread.
Yeah, like 9 years ago, by the way.
Yeah. And the title of it is, basically the subject line is, me and a friend found this creepy statue while hiking, and now strange things are going on. Anyone know what this is? Now, let me just take a quick pause and say, for a lot of things, man, Reddit can be useful. To this day, however, no one's been able to help me find the movie that I can't.
That is true.
So anyway, for anybody that doesn't know much about Reddit, essentially think of it as this humongous online message board that you can interact with other people based on topic. And you can go into these, like, sort of subtopics like paranormal, or they call them threads. Go in there and basically pose this question to thousands to hundreds of thousands, even millions of people to have them sort of, like, give you their opinion. And that's kind of what's happening here. So these guys found this thing. They're asking for help. Hey, what is this? Yeah. And then here we go. It says...
Which, by the way, is really cool because it...
Interrupted me. Asked him to do it, interrupted me.
No. I'm just going to say, for people who don't know what Reddit is, it's like 4chan, 8chan.
2chan.
There it is, yep. And it kind of harkens back to, like, Usenet or the very early days of the internet, which is kind of cool and nostalgic.
Oh, yeah, for sure. There's that kind of vibe. Anyway, let's dive into these guys' experience. So last weekend, my friend and I went hiking in the Catskills near Sundown Forest and found this really creepy statue while effing around in some caves. It has nails in its eyes and a noose around its neck. Looks like it might be old. I don't think it's been there very long, but it's weird because this cave was way off the trail. Someone had a fire in there not too long ago. And then they say, here's the pics. And they have a picture of how it looked inside of this cave. And folks, just if my description didn't do it for you, and you think, wooden statue with a noose around its neck and nails nailed into its eyes, sounds more like a Disney afternoon for you. The way that this thing is situated inside of this cave, the fact that these guys picked it up after just coming upon this, I got to tell you, man, or moving it in any way, I would have been like, wow, that's very strange, creepy, and then I'm out of there, man.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll post those pictures on the Instagram for those of you listening. Heck, we might even do it on the day of the show.
Yeah.
They go on to say, the statue really wigged me out, but my buddy decided to take it home with him, even though I told him not to. Now, let me break in here again.
Yeah.
This is a great sign and probably should have been a signal to you that you need to find some new friends.
Yeah.
Okay, first off, if they don't listen to you, kick them out. Second, terrible suggestion. Yeah. Anyway, maybe that was a little harsh on my behalf, but moving forward. Everyone says that there's devil worshipers that come out here to sacrifice animals and do their spells and shit, so I don't want anything to do with this thing. A couple days later, my friend calls me and tells me that he thinks the statue is haunted because it keeps moving from its spot and he keeps smelling weird stuff. He says he can't sleep at night because banging keeps waking him up. Now, last night, someone knocked on his door, but no one was there when he opened it, and he's super weirded out. He thinks he has a ghost because of the statue. It must just be coincidence, but I think he's actually scared. Before we go set the thing on fire, I wanted to see if anyone knows what it is. Anyone ever seen something like this or heard of a statue causing ghosts?
Hundreds.
And then it says throw away because I didn't want to use my main account for spoopy stuff. I'm not sure what that means, but they did go on to post an update and an edit. And it says, my friend showed up here at like 11:30. And now, folks, this is where it gets real spoopy.
Yeah, very spoopy.
He's out of his mind scared. I've never seen him like this before. I'm going to do my best to remember everything he just told me because it was a lot. But long story short, he's sleeping over because something is in his house. Now, we found the statue on a Sunday, and like I said, I told him not to take it because it gave me bad vibes, but he took it anyway. He's been an atheist as long as I've known him, so when he told me that something was going on, I thought he was just messing with me because he knows I like to watch paranormal shows, and he's always made fun of me for it. It started out just as knocks and banging, but he said that by Wednesday, he started waking up in the middle of the night feeling like someone was watching. This kept happening through the week, and every time he'd wake up, he would smell a really strong scent like pond water. He doesn't believe any of this stuff, so he just ignored it until a few days ago when the statue moved from his desk into his living room. I love that this dude ignored the pond water scent, thinking, Anyway, he says that every night since Thursday, it's moved into a different room than where he left it. He thought it was his dog moving it around because it smelled funny, but his dog won't go anywhere near it. He says that she's actually peed in the house 3 nights in a row, and she's never done that. Last night, someone knocked on his door at 3 a.m, but when he went to open it, there was no one there. His motion lights weren't on, and there weren't any cars in his driveway. He said that he opened up the door to look outside, and that's when he knew that he had made a big mistake. Like, he just felt like he shouldn't have opened his door. That's why I made this post in the first place. At that point, I didn't have any reason not to believe him because it had gone way beyond a joke, and he actually sounded really, really effing scared on the phone. He kept telling me that he was going to burn the statue because he knows that something followed him home. Anyway, he stayed up all night and then decided to go to the movies to take his mind off of it. Okay.
Yep.
As you do. Hey, you guys playing Despicable Me 3? When he got home, he said it felt like everything was fine and he decided to finally go to bed. This is where it gets super effed up and spoopy. Oh, so spoopy. He said the pond water smell was stronger than ever. And when he went out into his hallway, he saw all of these muddy footprints everywhere. Not like shoe prints, but barefoot.
Which, by the way, not to interject, but didn't that happen with the Hexham Heads? Didn't they see?
I don't remember if it was the Hexham Heads. I know I think it was the Taronga Stone.
Oh, maybe it was.
Remember they had and then they saw like the Aboriginal guy in the hallway. Okay, so he wakes up, and it was like around 10 or so, and this dog was just barking like crazy. He said again that the pond water smell was stronger than ever, and when he goes out in the hallway, he sees these muddy, barefoot footprints. All of his doors and windows were locked, he said. After someone knocked on his door, he freaked out and made sure everything was locked up before he went to bed, of course. So there's no freaking way that anyone could have gotten inside.
Mm-hmm.
Sitting in the living room was the flippin' statue, which had moved again.
Mm-hmm.
And he says that when he started to go near it, he heard someone breathing. Like his grandpa with a tracheotomy, he says.
Good Lord.
He pieced the F out, and now he and his dog are sleeping in my guest room tonight. I've never seen him this scared, and he even started crying. I have no effing idea what to do. I believe him because he has no reason to lie about this because it's way too far to be a joke now. I know that everyone says not to burn it or whatever, so what the F do we do?
Yeah.
He wants me to go to his house to get the statue tomorrow, but I'm too effing freaked out to take it back to where we found it because I don't want to see whoever put it there. Sorry for the typos. I just wanted to write this out quick so I know that I got it all. Edit number 2. Sorry I haven't posted. Things got worse yesterday night. So we sent the statue to the guy in the comments today. So far, so good. Thanks to everyone who actually tried to help and didn't just call us a couple of effing idiots.
We'll return after these messages.
America's future can be determined by our dreams and our visions.
It was very intense, bright light.
For over 200 years, there have been reports of giant man-like creatures
from another dimension, another world, I don't know.
The most intriguing mystery on the North American continent.
This is Joshua Cutchin, and you're at my home for weirdness. That would be rad.
Which, by the way, I think this is such a cool story because if again, this is 9 years ago. So it's cool because you could look at all like the replies and stuff, and there's so many replies. It's like, oh, send it to Greg Newkirk.
Yeah.
Send it to the Newkirks. So it's like
cool.
It's like a real, you're seeing it in real time. And then even somebody's even like, hey, here's his address. And the reason they did that is the Newkirks are filmmakers. Like I said, they did Hellier. But before that, they had this like paranormal museum, and they would like travel around to like.
I think they still do.
Yeah, they do. But that was like what they were known for back then, and so
like they would collect these artifacts, and so people would send them to them. And the whole point of the paranormal museum, this like a traveling museum, was to give people the chance to have some sort of interaction with a supposed like haunted or cursed object and stuff. Now, again, I'm very happy for these folks finding a niche that they're able to kind of, make a living off of.
Yeah.
I gotta say, man, I am not that demographic. I do not want to have a personal experience with a cursed object.
Yeah, no.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of reminds me, and we've talked about Zach Baggins before. He has like another sort of haunted thing, and it's like, it is really cool. And I think it's a huge service to that culture and that sort of community, that kind of niche community, because like it is wild the amount of people online, and maybe you get rid of half of them as being like hoaxes and just made up, but I think there is something to it. I mean, we just talked about like the crying boy photo or the haunted painting. So there is something there. But anyway, like I was saying before, like it's cool because you see all these people saying, oh yeah, you need to contact Greg Newkirk. And so he did, or him and his friend did, and they ended up sending it to them. And then from that point on, like it was such a resounding, definitive case of like, hey, there's something to this, that like they went on to make a full-on documentary about it, which I mentioned before, called The Unbinding, and I thought it was awesome.
Yeah, it's really good. It really kind of dives deeper into the spooky stuff that happened after
they had
what were they called? The Robinsons?
The Newkirks.
After the Newkirks
Greg and Dana
got a hold
Newkirk.
of it.
Yeah.
And you kind of get to see there's, in my opinion, really cool that they documented it along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they had this item for like a decade before like what ends up happening. Anyway, right now it's on Tubi, I think, right? For free that you can stream it. I don't,
You can buy it on like Prime and stuff, but
if you want to buy it,
just go to Tubi.
If you don't mind commercials,
then
you can watch it on Tubi.
But it's like 2 commercials per the whole movie.
It was. I thought it was really good, man.
Yeah.
And some of the creepy stuff that happened. So like, I gotta say this just to kind of like entice folks to watch, unless you want to dig into what happened to it.
Mm-hmm. No. You go ahead.
Initially, when they first get it, they're kind of like creeped out by it. It's weird. They don't really know what, man, it's strange.
Mm-hmm.
Greg Newkirk, right?
Yes.
Greg leaves it, I'm just going to call him Greg. Okay. Greg leaves it in his office, and they've got these like trail cams because I think something happens and they're just like, man, that's weird. I didn't move it, kind of deal.
Well, yeah. So let me give just a little bit of context. So these people are, I think it's sufficient to say that they're not afraid of this stuff. I mean, they have a whole haunted paranormal museum, so they have like tons of this stuff. She, the wife, Dana Newkirk, is like a professed like witch. So she's like heavily into the occult. And, and that plays a part into the movie later when they're doing the Estes method, and then they do some like ritual stuff. So if you're not a fan of that, you may want to, hold off on watching it. But anyway, all that to say,
the Estes method isn't weird.
No, not the Estes method. But she is like, she's coming from a place where she's viewing all of this through the lens of like sort of occult, like magic and like a ritualistic sort of practice. Or practicing person. And so she's not the type that's going to scare easily. And so I think the whole thing kicked off is when she, and I may be getting this wrong, but with the timeline, but I think she wakes up because she sees this black, crone, like an old lady, like opening the door, which it gave me cold chills when I saw it because it immediately reminded me of my sort of shadow person encounter. Mm-hmm. Although this was a lot more geared to like be scary because you see like the long, like sort of like almost like Grinch like fingers. Did you notice that?
Right. Yeah.
Which is like super scary. And I'm sure that they just put that in there for, sort of scare value, but they do it really well. But yeah, she basically saw this black, what looked like a creature, an old lady, whatever, kind of come out of this closet, and then she's freaking out and goes to wake up Greg. By the time he wakes up, it sort of retreats back into the door, shuts the door behind it. Mm-hmm. And then they're like, oh, this is serious. So then that's when they set up the the trail cam.
Yeah, there's just a bunch of weird stuff happening. And like you said, man, these folks, for whatever reason, feel protected in one way or the other. And it is kind of cool. They talk about how like they first met. I think he had a crush on her when they were like kids, and now they're married,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool.
Anyhow, he sets up a trail cam in his office. And at first there's like a couple like orb type things that happen, and you're like, oh, okay, that's weird.
Well, which by the way, that was fascinating because usually orbs, and they even say this on the show, usually orbs, which is a common thing, are just, moisture in the
dust,
room, drops,
a bug, whatever.
Yeah, right. But what's crazy about this one is you see, and they talk about this on on the documentary, but you see an orb, and then the next one you see,
the next frame,
like the orb is out of view, but you see
the light pattern.
Yeah, a light reflecting off of a camera, mm-hmm. or
It's like imagine a ball of light moving out of the frame, but you can still see the illumination, the light out of frame.
Yeah.
In the same direction that the orb went,
Right, yeah.
Anyhow, that is kind of weird. But as they're kind of like dissecting this movement or whatever, mm-hmm. they notice the freaking statue, and dude, it shows it.
Yeah.
And I was, I'm generally somewhat skeptical about this stuff, but I believe it enough not to mess with it, you know what I mean?
Same.
So, but like, you see this freaking statue, it's sitting on a desk chair
mm-hmm.
in the corner, basically. And as the orb passes by, you see this thing move.
Yeah.
And not just like tump over or whatever. I'm talking like
over.
Tip, tump, what am I? It doesn't just like
fine.
Tip. It doesn't tip over.
Trump over.
It like twists.
Yeah.
Toward the camera. Like,
yeah.
Bonk, in one like swift movement.
Mm-hmm.
And they say in the documentary, like, look, we try to rationalize this as like maybe, a heavy truck, went by, and you know how some things can like vibrate in your house and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Sometimes on the show, you guys can hear the train in the background, or whatever. Mm-hmm. So, okay, so even they, I think, as we all do, kind of rationalize this stuff.
Yeah, you try to figure out ways of like,
this was only the beginning of the craziness.
Yeah.
There's all this other stuff that they do. They try to 3D model it.
No. Dude, you got to talk about the crucifix. So this was like one of the weirdest things.
Now, I don't want to give away all the stuff that happens in the documentary.
Yeah. I don't want to. No, but I think the thing that like sets the tone is like and again, we may be getting this wrong, but on the like the timeline of the chronological events, but there's one point where they're both like awakened by the sound of like banging, what sounds like on their front door. And so they get up, or he gets up, Greg gets up, goes out, nobody's at the door. Then he hears like another banging, I guess, in the room where the statue was. And he goes in there, and as he walks in, he almost steps on a little Jesus figure that was on a crucifix, which was on a wall. The weird thing is, and he says, he's like, this crucifix is held up by like one nail on the wall. It's just like a little, sort of Catholic iconography, just a little crucifix with Jesus hanging on the cross. And what's weird about it is the Jesus is broken off, but yet one of the arms is still like hanging on there. Mm-hmm. And so what's weird about this is the only way you could have done that was if you're holding the cross with one hand and then you break Jesus off the cross, because it's still up on the wall. Yeah. And that's the point where he was like, okay, there's something that like, is this thing, like, is there some sort of like anger involved with this?
Yeah, some sort of like animosity, and especially like maybe toward, the symbol of Christ. Or whatever. Yeah. And, well, I kind of want them to experience what they experienced in the Estes method.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Well, real quick, just what he's talking about, and I'm probably ruining this because I don't know a ton about it, but I've seen it done for years. But there's this thing called the Estes method, which is like, it's almost like a sense deprivation.
Hold on. First, you need to describe what the other method is that this guy doesn't like, and that's why they do the Estes method.
Wait,
so there's this like, okay, so there's this basically, there's within the paranormal sort of
like ghost
hunter type circles, there's this method that uses essentially it's just like a radio scanner, and it scans the AM radio waves. And basically, as it's scanning through, it's thought that whatever entity that you're trying to communicate with will utilize words as it's scanning through to communicate back to you. Now, sometimes Greg talks about how he doesn't really like that method because it leaves too much room for
like interpretation,
influence, really.
Yeah, right.
Because you're hearing what the person is asking, and then maybe subconsciously even you're sort of just looking out for those answers within the words that you're hearing from the AM radio scan. Right. So the Estes method,
it's genius,
is amazing because it eliminates so many of those variables. Yeah. In a more, it's hard to call it, but in a more scientific way. Okay, so you deprive the person, or you keep them from having any sort of outer influence of the person hearing the question. So in other words, you put noise-canceling headphones on. They can't hear what the person is asking. In this case, they set it up to where they're trying to communicate with this statue. Yeah. They've got the wife, Dana, with noise-canceling headphones on. They show that she can't hear them. And then she's got a blindfold on.
Yeah, right.
And she's sitting there, and she's just listening. The audio that she's hearing is from this scanner. So then, again, that keeps her from being influenced by the question.
Yeah. No sort of external bias.
Right. No external bias, so that anything that she hears and says out loud as a quote-unquote answer, if it was just complete BS, wouldn't even make sense. They'd be like, red car first. Like if you said, hey, what's your name? And they said,
there is no Dana, only soul.
Lovely singing voice you must have.
It wouldn't make sense, right?
Right.
Okay, so I don't want to tell you what happens here, but I will say I didn't know anything about the Estes method.
Yeah.
And the stuff that she says back, man.
It's pretty fascinating.
Oh, wow. It's crazy.
Because she can't, like Woody was saying, she can't hear or see anything. And so you have Greg and then this other guy, she's kind of sitting on like a bed or whatever. And I think it was cool too because they're doing all this in like a hotel room. So, you know, to me that was cool because it doesn't look like they're trying to like amp up the scariness by like doing it in their paranormal museum and so it's like they did it so it was sort of a neutral environment to do that in a way, you know? So she's completely shut off all her senses. All she can hear is like, you know, the signal stuff. And so these two guys are on the outside asking the thing questions or saying,
like, hey, you know, where did, I don't remember what the questions were, but this is just an example. Hey, like, where did you come from or something like that? Or, you know, I don't know, just a bunch of different stuff like that. And then she would just be like, she would say these responses, man. And it was enough to like, okay, as an audience watching this, can I prove that she absolutely cannot hear them? No. But they do a great job of sort of establishing trust with these individuals that I have no prior history. I don't know anything about them.
Yeah.
Me, personally. But you get to that part, and it is so freaking incredible, the things that she's saying, that immediately I'm like, dude, can she hear him? But there's elements of it where you're like, no, I don't think so, man.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and it's, to me, I feel like it's not like every sort of response is not like a direct response. Like there's, which to me lends more credibility. Like, and again, like I don't want to give a lot of it away, but like, you know, they would ask like, you know, where were you or something like that. And then like it responds like covered in rain or like weird kind of stuff that kind of makes sense within the context of like what their, you know, their subject is.
And it's just freaky. Another thing that happens in the documentary that's not really like spoiling it is like the first time, or one of the first times that they take this figure to, I think it was like a paranormal convention. A real popular one. I don't remember where it is. I think it's in Pennsylvania.
I think it was like a Michigan like Paracon.
Or maybe it was Michigan. For some reason I thought it was Pennsylvania.
Which is like a Comic-Con for like the paranormal.
Right. And it's like a big deal. So they take it there. And the second that they unveil this thing, dude, all kinds of crazy stuff starts happening.
Yeah, dude.
Some dude starts having a seizure. Something happens like to the electricity, I think.
Well, so
doesn't somebody get like rained on? Or I mean, like,
yeah. So what's weird about this, and this is the crazy part, when that part came on. So I never knew about the Catskills Crone. I've never heard about that, and I've never known anything about it. But I do remember listening to some podcast years ago where they were talking. And what's funny is like this stuff would have happened probably long before they started actually making the documentary, you know? But what was weird about it is like, I totally remember somebody on the podcast talking about, I was at this like Paracon or like, and maybe it was like some other presenter or speaker or something that does those Paracon conferences. But I remember them talking about like that. Like, there was this item that these people brought, and like, you know, we thought a guy, as soon as they brought it out, like a guy started having a seizure. All this like, you know, hell just totally broke loose when they pulled out this object. And it was crazy because like I totally remember hearing about that, but I never knew like what it was.
Right.
Which is cool.
It's just bizarre. I mean, and also just, again, a reason why, like even the Estes method, is fascinated as I am by that and seeing that in this documentary, I'm not going to be putting those headphones. The fact, it reminds me of, what's that movie, dude, where they shake the thing's hand and then the spirit comes?
Dude, I still have not seen it.
Oh, God, what is it called?
I've heard it's amazing, though. It's kind of like a Hand of Glory type thing, right?
Kind of. It's like this wooden carving, and it's got all these like writings and stuff on it. Hold on just a second, I'll find it. I think it's on Paramount.
Like sigils and stuff.
Talk to Me.
Talk to Me.
Yeah, the movie Talk to Me, which, you know, if you haven't figured out just our love for basically anything and everything, Australian or New Zealand, these dudes were like, the guys that made this movie, Talk to Me, were like stuntmen, and they just decided, or like, no, they were special effects guys, I think, something like that. And well, now that I've got the story wrong, I'm just gonna not talk. Anyways, they weren't proper filmmakers. They
Right.
made this movie, and it's just so good.
Yeah.
It's freaky, and it perfectly depicts why. In fact, after we get done talking about this stuff, Tyler, you have to watch this movie.
Yeah.
Today, dude. It's
I've heard it's awesome.
yeah.
I haven't watched it because I didn't think you could stream it. I thought you had to buy it. So, but anyway, like I know we've sort of got Jesus, I cannot think of that. I had like a horrible migraine yesterday. This is just side note.
Mm-hmm.
The medication that I take, which does knock out the migraine, which is like Maxalt or rizatriptan, it makes me so dumb for like 2 days after.
He's been taking it since he was a child. And so
Every day. And so I'm a little on the slower side today. But anyway, I know that we've sort of intrigued you with talk about this movie, The Unbinding. But Woody's right. We don't want to give it away. It's really fascinating.
These folks deserve your attention.
Mm-hmm.
You should watch it. It's really cool in terms of like being able to watch this stuff happen, because a lot of these like ghost hunter shows and that kind of stuff, it's more like there's this sort of performance art added to it that I'm just not really having a good time watching it.
Mm-hmm.
This is not like that. It's very well done in terms of it being documentary style.
Mm-hmm.
They're not like, it's not hype train, kind of like, let's go to the, they add the element of spookiness to it. I recommend watching it with headphones on. The sound design's good. It kind of sounds like one of our episodes, really.
Yeah.
And it's just well done. And you should check it out and see what happens and see how it ends up, because it's very, very fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. It is really, really cool. I mean, and like I said, if you're a fan of Hellier, it's the same people. And it's kind of in the same vein. I mean, in Hellier, they utilize like the Estes method and stuff too.
Now, let me say something real quick.
Okay.
Usually when we talk about this scary stuff, of course, we're going to say the obvious, like if you ever find anything in the woods, don't pick it up and take it home, blah, 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 blah. In fact, don't even touch it, honestly.
And don't burn it. That's also a big thing.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. We like to give like some words of advice, you know what I mean? Not just leave you with, hey, there's scary stuff in the world.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what to do with it. Bye-bye. Yeah. First, just like Tyler just said, one of the first comments on this Reddit thread is don't burn it.
Yeah.
And here's what it says. If there's something attached to it, all you're going to do is set it loose to attach to something else.
Yeah.
Maybe, a person, maybe another something. So all that said, when you see these pictures of this thing and how they found it in this cave, oh man, it's just so scary, dude.
Yeah, it's really weird. And also sort of researching this stuff, you do start to find that like in this area, there are a lot of sort of pagan ritualistic practices. I mean, it kind of reminds me of like the Blair Witch, like people leaving like effigies and like sort of bones hanging from trees and like, which is pretty creepy. The one to me though, I think that's really interesting because, and they briefly kind of talk about this in the documentary, but they talk about how there's like these pockets of like, Slavic sort of paganism and stuff. And, it possibly being tied to that or possibly like European stuff. And it's interesting because once you kind of delve into that area, I would say, and I brought this up before, the most popular thing is Washington Irving's Rip Van Winkle. And I haven't read it in years, but for those who don't know, it was published in 1819. It follows a Dutch-American villager in colonial America named Rip Van Winkle who meets a mysterious Dutchman. He ends up taking his strong liquor and falling asleep in the Catskill Mountains for 20 years. And when he
wakes
I always
up.
feel like that's when he awakes. That's wrong. Right?
Awakens.
When he wakes? He awakens?
Well, yeah, you could say
See
when
what
he
I mean?
wakes, but like you could also say when he awakens.
It all
or
sounds wrong.
When he wakes up.
When he wakes up, he realizes that he's completely missed the Revolutionary War, which is, I mean, kind of nice in a way.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, okay.
But it's interesting because these stories, like I said, this is published in 1819, and he's not even Washington Irving wasn't even originally from this area. So I would imagine that these tales and these this sort of mythology and folklore of the area has been around for years and years and years. And one of the things that you hear a lot about, these little people, or these, you hear them called like fairies sometimes, or like elves, or dwarves in this area. I mean, even the Hudson, which was like what the area is called, like Hudson Valley or whatever, he arrived, he was a sailor, he arrived with his crew, and one of the tales is, he's one of the people who discovered the area. One of the tales is that when they arrived, they were drawn into the area because they were hearing like singing. And so all these sailors kind of, I just picture them like going into this area, climbing up this mountain, and finding what they call these like little people, or these gnomes basically, who were playing nine pins, which is like bowling, and they were drinking. And they say like there's still this myth that like every 20 years you can hear up in the Catskill Mountains, you can hear like music and people having a good time and dancing and stuff, because it's kind of like reenacting that event. I don't know. It's really interesting because you think, like to me, I thought that was fascinating because the idea of Rip Van Winkle, taking a food or drink offering from a little person. It took me to Joshua Cutchin, A Trojan Feast, where, his whole book, A Trojan Feast, is about the food and drink offerings of, quote unquote, the other. So like the Fae or aliens or ETs or any of the sort of paranormal stuff. But that's kind of this common thread of like, you never should drink or partake in any food or drink from these people or these beings, because it's part of the way that they can trap you in like the fairyland or whatever is what they would say in Ireland and ancient Scottish lore and stuff. And I thought that was really interesting because like the area is so known for these like gnomes or little people, and then you have these stories of Rip Van Winkle basically being involved in a fairy abduction. Yeah. Which is, I don't know, that's just so fascinating.
Super cool. And not only that, man, it's in the part of our country that is, in terms of the European influence and lore, one of the oldest in terms of it being, one of the first sort of areas that was colonized and stuff like that. And so you've got these belief systems from, I think this was another interesting thing about the Crone. They talked to some professor and they were talking about like Slavic folklore and stuff that was more passed down orally versus written down. And so all these traditions sort of pass through, and they even sort of end up kind of tracking down what this could be. Here's another sort of interesting thing. When you mentioned the like the gnomes and stuff, initially when we were talking about all the crazy stuff that happens up in the Catskills, one of the things I found is like in some accounts, these creatures are sort of known as the guardians of these mountains and rivers and even caves. And they're often only seen as like fleeting shadows or strange. They see these strange childlike footprints in muddy paths. And legends say they're protectors of the natural world, but are also known to play tricks on unsuspecting travelers, like leading them in circles or hiding objects. Now, this immediately made me think of whenever I was a teenager, in Boy Scouts and stuff, we would hike up the Appalachian Trail all the time. Countless times, man. And during spring break and stuff, when we have like a week off, and it sounds funny because most people would like be going to the beach, but us dorks that like the outside in the woods would hike the trail like around 50 miles or so. Dude, one year, no lie, middle of the night. Well, not middle of the night, but go to bed. Your hiking boots and stuff are just so like nasty.
Oh yeah.
You're hiking through, wading through rivers sometimes and sweat and all that. So you don't want them inside your tent.
Of course.
Because why would you want to go to sleep next to that?
Yeah.
Well, I wake up in the morning, hiking boots are gone. Now, we're secluded, dude. There's no one around us. We haven't even seen another hiker the entire trip at this point. No, just gone. We're at like mile 22 of our 50-mile hike. There's no going back. I can't go like, well, guys, we'll see you next time. We're in this together. I basically had thank goodness, I had an extra pair of like Tevas, like some sandals. I hiked the rest of the way with Tevas, and it was awful.
Miserable.
But some other weird things that happened that same trip. One, weird but also cool. You know when you're hiking, you kind of get separated from each other, and you have these moments where you're just kind of alone. And it started snowing on me. And it was like this really sort of magical experience. Honestly, it felt like, now having done this show for 4 seasons, now I'm like, dude, did I go into like a realm? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it wasn't supposed to snow, it wasn't in the forecast. It was just really kind of bizarre but beautiful.
Yeah, that's cool.
And then later on, this is the same trip where the bridge that we were supposed to use to cross this river had been washed out, and we had to get somebody had to like help us across. We just like basically bear hugged their kayak, and they kayaked us across one by one. But anyway, bottom line is, were these freaking gnomes that stole my shoes meant to try to keep me from?
They are. If they're known for anything, it's being like tricksters. They're very much in that like trickster archetype, which is interesting. Well, and another thing that it made me think of is and we've mentioned this several times for our old listeners, is the idea that like that Appalachian mountain range is the same range that, if you follow it, it carries over through like the British Isles and through that same
the Highlands and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So, is it the same thing?
Ancient beings.
Yeah, 100%. I love it. Go watch the movie. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, you got to check it out.
Also, if you do want to continue some research into the Catskills, it is cool. And I kind of think that in the research, I've realized that like I think this could be another like window area because there's tons of accounts of like UFOs, will-o'-the-wisps, which again, that's such a common fairy thing. And I feel like what I saw, my orbs, I feel like they're probably the exact same thing as what people are seeing, these balls of light. But there's all kinds of stuff. And then it also involves like Algonquin, I think Iroquois, even like, indigenous people like folklore tied in. So it's like, it's a real kind of like when we talked about like the Pennsylvania Dutch up there is like a Slavic kind of, little bits of like traditions and stuff weaved into. So it's pretty fascinating, and I'm excited for you to go up and I don't know. Hopefully you'll see something.
Yeah, man, me too. Some of the other stuff that it talks about, or like that happened there, like things from like supposed witchcraft going on in the mountains, haunted areas. There's this thing called the Blue Mountain Ghost. There are stories and accounts of strange disappearances and loss of time, much like Rip Van Winkle.
Yep.
UFOs, like you said, sleeping giants, lost civilizations, Dutch influence, Slavic influence. And, I started thinking of this too before, as we like wrap up. Let's say there are gnomes and they're not like, old gods or whatever. Let's just say gnomes. It's just like this other civilization of another type of person that lives in this area that have been around for a long time. Dude, they would also have their own set of belief systems.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe they're the ones that carved this statue to ward off or to, curse somebody, whatever it is. That's something to think about. I don't know. I just thought that is just super interesting to think of, like these other types of beings that people, or not beings, but creatures or even like humanoids that people see, if they're intelligent enough to sort of have their own little societies, I don't think it's too off base to think like, hey, look, they probably have their own set of belief systems. Just look at the Ewoks when they first met C-3PO.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
just like on Endor. You got these people in the Catskills are doing their own thing. Hopefully you've enjoyed the show. We know that it was pretty rambling, or rambly as Woody says, but we hope you enjoyed it. It was kind of
spoopy. It was a little spoopy.
Yeah. for us, we haven't really been able to get into, just kind of catching up. So a lot of that is this. And if you like the show, then we're glad to have you. If you want to tell your own story, hit us up on Instagram, shoot us a DM. If it's more long form, head on over to thatwouldberadpod@gmail.com. Feel free to tell the story. Even better, head on over to thatwouldberadpodcast.com, our website, where you can leave it in your own voice. Urban legends, local cryptids, weird little localized folklore. That's the stuff that we absolutely love, much like Mike Mignola. So if you have any of that stuff, feel free to shoot it to us. We'd love to hear about it, and it may be featured in an upcoming episode. Tell a single friend about the show. Leave a 5-star review whenever you can. It means the world. And the best way to support our show, aside from those two, is joining our Patreon, The Rabbit Trail. It's more of what you love. It's a little looser, maybe even a little more rambly. And it really helps keep the train on the tracks because, like I said a few episodes ago, it's just Woody and I. We don't have, production. We don't have any of that. It's like everything you see visually, everything you hear, sound design, mixing, editing, all that stuff. It's just Woody and I doing it all. So it really does help make a dent, at least, in everything that goes into making this show. So, yeah, drop us a line, tell a friend, do all the things. You got anything else, Woody?
Don't forget to tell me your thoughts on whether or not I have a serial killer living in my neighborhood. Hopefully not. But other than that, nah, man, I'm good.
For sure. Also, go watch The Unbinding. It's awesome. Yeah, especially if you like this episode. I guess that's it. Well, we love you. We appreciate you. And as always,
be rad.
That's the way it goes. Time where I just needed some sunshine. You were already dead, for you became a ghost. You always said our future would be a parade of flowers, but now all that's left is a single rose. That's the way it goes.
granted.
Remember they had like, and then they saw like the Aboriginal guy in the hallway. Oh God, I was washing dishes.
Was it clean at the end though? I feel like we were kind of talking all over each other.
Yeah, it's clean enough, man. Talking over each other is the best part. Okay,
yeah, that's true. People love it.
Yeah, when they can't they can't differentiate who is saying what. Messed it up, gave it up, then went back to it.
Yeah. Well.
Shh.